Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sophie, and I'm one of the educators here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach. For those of you that are watching us live, it is 10 on the dot on Tuesday, November 14th. You are more than welcome to watch this after the fact or whenever it reaches you. And if you are watching along live and have any questions at all, you are more than welcome to text or call us down here at the number. It is 562-286 1838. And like I said, if you're watching it after the fact but still want to share something or ask any questions, you're more than welcome to email us at live@lbaop.org. Now, I'm also joined today in the studio by my friend Tiffany, and she will be monitoring that text and call line. So feel free to let us know if there's anything you're curious about, if you want to share any observations, or of course, if you have any questions. Now, I am very excited today because we are talking about one of my favorite animals, and I could talk about these animals quite literally for hours, but unfortunately we only have 30 minutes today. So I'm going to highlight some of my favorite parts about some of these animals, also talk a little bit about why they are important in our ocean ecosystems. Now, without giving too much away, I want us all to practice using our scientist brains today, and I want you all to make some observations. So observation is just a very fancy word for looking at the things you see around you and taking notice of that. So I'm going to step off screen and give you a couple of moments to take some observations about the exhibit that you are looking at behind me. This is one of our live cams from here at the aquarium. So if I were to walk outside right now and take a look in this exhibit, I would be seeing the exact same view that you are seeing. So what kind of animals are you noticing? Is there a common theme? What does the kind of habitat or the home of these animals look like? Like I said, if you want to share your answers with us live, we have our text line down there. Also, you can just turn to the people around you and talk about what you are seeing. But has anyone kind of guessed the common theme today for what we're talking about? We have a good amount of these animals in the exhibit that we are looking at right now. Ooh, and we got that really characteristic dorsal fin that's going to kind of help us figure out who we are talking about today. So if you haven't figured it out yet, today we are talking about sharks. Sharks are amazing creatures. They have a lot of cool adaptations, and they play a very important role in our ecosystems. Now, sharks look a little bit different depending on the shark. There's lots of shapes, lots of sizes. But let's go ahead and take some observations about the different types of sharks we see in here. Right now, you might have noticed a kind of gray one or another gray one kind of swimming by. Those two kind of look the same. The one that just swam by and the one that came right in front of the camera, those kind of look similar. One of them had a really characteristic black coloring on the tips of those fins. That shark is called our black tip reef shark. And then we also had a gray reef shark swimming by. So when you think of sharks, those reef sharks kind of have that stereotypical shark shape to them. That really nice, sharp, triangular dorsal fin. Oh, perfect. We get a close-up look. That kind of triangular or almost diamond-shaped body. If you kind of make a diamond and then stretch it out, that's kind of the shark shape that you'll get. Those really nice triangular dorsal fins, like I said. And then they also have those really nice back tail fins, or the caudal fins as well. Now let's go ahead and go back to Shark Lagoon. Let's see if we can spot any other sharks that may look a little bit different. So we talked about our black tip reef shark and our gray reef shark. As you can imagine, those animals really like to live in these sunny kind of reef areas you see displayed here in Shark Lagoon. And it looks like we see a much longer tail and a different type of shark swimming by. What are some observations or differences you have between the shark that just swam by, which is our zebra shark, or maybe some of the other sharks that swam by, the black tip and the gray reef shark? I know for one, when I see our zebra sharks, and one of the ways I'm able to kind of distinguish them from the other animals is our zebra sharks have very long tails to them. Zebra shark tails can take up about a third of their total body length. So these animals have very, very long tails, much longer compared to the black tip and the gray reef shark. And what's also different about them is kind of their color or the pattern that they have. As you're looking at the zebra shark, oh, awesome comparison. Thank you, Tiffany. So as we're looking at our gray reef shark, we have a really nice kind of solid gray color to it, as the name suggests. Not really any spots, not really any patterns. It looks very, very smooth. And then if we take a look at our zebra shark, we get a really nice comparison. The zebra shark has all those dots all over it, that really gorgeous pattern to it. And you may be wondering to yourself, well, it doesn't really look like a zebra. It looks a little bit more like a leopard. Why is this person calling it a zebra shark? So there's actually a little bit of a kind of funny story behind this. When zebra sharks are first born, they are born with stripes, just like a zebra. We get a really good look at our juveniles right there, or our babies. So you can see those stripes along the zebra shark, and like I said, it looks exactly like a zebra. But when these sharks get a little bit older, those stripes turn into dots, and we get that kind of a leopard pattern that we see on the older zebra shark. Now, in other places of the world that you may travel to, for instance, maybe Australia, they may have a different name for these sharks over there. In Australia and other regions of the world, zebra sharks are actually known as leopard sharks. But here in Southern California, we are very fortunate that we actually have our own species of leopard shark that looks a lot different than our zebras. So that's why we have a couple different names. Oh, perfect. The leopard sharks are some of my favorite animals. So we see that really nice kind of saddleback coloration along them right here, a kind of nice gray-brown color for these animals. And you'll notice that this also looks very kind of leopard-y. So when we're looking at our sharks right here, the leopard shark, like I said, gorgeous pattern to it, but don't get confused if you hear people say zebra or leopard sharks. It may just depend on the part of the world that you are in. Ooh, and it also looks like we have a question from one of our classes that is tuning in right now. Very good question. How many types of sharks are there? Does anyone out there have any guesses? What do you think? You can always give like a ballpark too, like a good estimate. In science, sometimes you have to give a hypothesis or an estimate based on other evidence you may have. So if you have any ballpark guesses, feel free to let us know in the chat. But the correct answer for how many types of sharks are there are over 500 species. And this also depends on research and what different scientists are up to. Sometimes we discover new species of sharks that we may not have noticed. Sometimes sharks may breed with other sharks or mate with other sharks, and then maybe we get some hybrids or some different types of sharks. So it all just kind of depends on what the research is being done, and also how our human impacts are affecting these shark populations, because unfortunately, sometimes we can lose shark species or sharks can go extinct. And we'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end of our program. We'll talk about what threats sharks are facing and also what we can do to better help these animals. But first, I want to talk a little bit about why these animals are so cool and why I love them so much. So sharks are a little bit different than traditional fish, like if you think about maybe a goldfish or a Garibaldi. They're a little bit different, and they're also kind of different than us. And what are those key differences? Does anyone have any ideas as to what those key differences are, or if you've learned about sharks and rays before? Let's think about it for a little bit. Or maybe we can get a picture of one of our fish friends, and we'll be able to take a look at one of our fish friends up for a good comparison. Oh, perfect. This is a Garibaldi, one of our state fish here in California. So as you're looking at the fish, especially on the outside, there are some differences. First, the fins aren't really as triangular as some of the sharks we've seen. Also, these fish look a little bit more kind of flat. They're almost kind of, if you kind of squish them down, kind of just like this, they swim around pretty flat and compressed, whereas sharks are usually kind of triangular, that nice diamond shape. So we can see some external differences on the animal. For one, on the sharks, you may not have noticed this, but sharks also have gill slits. So they have gills down the side of their body. If I were a shark, they'd probably be like right here on the side of my body, and those are going to help the animal breathe. Oh, look we can see those gill slits on the shark. Now, fish, on the other hand, don't really have gill slits. If we were looking at it, they'd probably be right here in this area. Instead, the fish have what's called an operculum. It's just a fancy name for a flap that will cover the gills of the fish. So those are some of the external or outside differences. Now, some of the really big differences are ones that can be found internally or inside the shark and inside the fish. One of which being what their bodies are made entirely out of. Now, I have a kind of fun, maybe a trick question, but a true-false for everyone out there. True or false? Do sharks have bones? True? Do you think sharks have bones? False? What do you think? Sharks don't have bones? Now, there are animals that may not have backbones or bones, and those are known as invertebrates. But this would be an invertebrate AOA today if we were talking about boneless animals. So what do you think, true or false? Now, it's actually a little bit of a trick question, and that's because sharks do have skeletons. However, it's not made out of the same tough bone material that we have in our bodies and that those other fish or the bony fish have in their bodies. Everyone go ahead, touch your nose, or maybe wiggle your ears. It's a lot more flexible than the bones we have in our arms or in our legs. And that flexible material in our nose and our ears is called cartilage. And that's actually what sharks have in their entire bodies. So they don't have any hard bone. Instead, they have that really nice, soft, and flexible cartilage. Sharks and rays also have this. So if you hear me talking about rays, or if you ever hear anyone talk about how rays and sharks are related, it's because they are both made entirely out of cartilage. And if you want the really fancy word for animals made out of cartilage, it is called chondrichthyes. I'm not even going to attempt to spell that because I know I'm going to butcher it. But if you want the fancy word for animals that are made out of cartilage, it is chondrichthyes, and it is referring to the sharks and the rays. Now, you may be wondering yourself, well, why is it beneficial to be made out of cartilage? Why is it good, or why are we putting so much emphasis on being made out of cartilage? And that's because it allows animals to move a little bit faster, and also they're going to be a lot lighter. Bones make animals pretty heavy, in addition to all the other stuff we have on our body, but bones make animals pretty heavy, pretty dense. Sharks and rays are able to swim very effortlessly. It also requires a lot less energy because they can just kind of cruise through. They're not super, super heavy like other animals with those really dense bones, so it means they can move a lot lighter, and it means they can conserve and save some of their energy, which is actually one of the favorite things of sharks to do because they are rather lazy. Well, I don't want to call them lazy. They are very, very efficient hunters, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But first, I want us to take a look at these sharks that we see swimming around here on my screen. Now, this is also from one of our touch pools here at the aquarium. And yes, I said you can touch the sharks that we have here at the aquarium. As long as you're using a gentle 2 fingers, it's totally okay to touch these sharks. And you may be wondering to yourself, well, are the sharks dangerous? Do they pose a threat to humans? What kind of crazy aquarium is this if they are allowing guests to touch sharks? Well, actually, truth be told, the sharks that you see here in this video are probably about this big. They are a species of bamboo sharks. I believe those are the brown-banded bamboo sharks. So they're usually about this big, maybe this big if they get a little bigger and longer. But these do not pose a threat to humans at all. And actually, most sharks don't really pose a threat to humans. Naturally, as humans, we are kind of afraid of things that we may not know. It's our natural instinct. We want to preserve ourselves in our life. It's something that we've inherited from generations in the past. We want to preserve our life. And naturally, we have to kind of use our senses to figure out what may be a threat to us or what may not be a threat to us. When you see these really big animals that you may not know anything about that have these really big teeth, your natural instinct is to kind of fear these animals. But actually, we don't really have much to be afraid of. These animals don't really want anything to do with us. A lot of the time when we're in our local beaches, they are aware that we are in their home, in their area, and they kind of just stay very clear away from us. Now, that's not to say you should go out into the ocean and you should go touch and harass these animals, because that is definitely not a good idea, regardless of the animal. However, it is really good to have a kind of healthy respect and a healthy caution for these animals. Yes, they are very good predators, but we don't really have anything to be afraid of. When we are entering their homes, we should be mindful that we are in another animal's home. We should be respectful to them and their space. And usually we can keep those human-shark interactions to very positive ones. So I like that question that we were asked, how many are dangerous to people? I would say they're not a threat to humans at all. We do want to be cautious when we're with them. Want to make sure that we are not harassing them, because no animals would really like that. But I like to think of sharks kind of the same way we think of bears. We know what to do. We are cautious. We are respectful when we are in their homes. We also know what they're capable of, and they are pretty powerful animals. So as long as we are keeping that healthy respect, also if you are diving with them, if you are going with professionals, or if you are taking precautions, that will make sure that we keep those human-shark interactions very positive. But a very good question that we were just asked a couple moments ago. So I've talked a little bit about different topics, kind of jumped around. That's something I usually do. But now I want to talk a little bit about what makes sharks the really good predators and the really good animals that they are. So I want everyone to take a couple of moments to themselves. Think about senses that we as humans have, or think about senses that other animals have. Go ahead and either share with us in the chat or turn to someone around you and talk about what sort of senses do we have? What do our senses help with? What senses are we using right now? You're probably using your eyesight, your sense of sight, if you are watching this with us. You may also be using your sense of hearing to be listening to what I'm talking about, and maybe any other things around you. So sharks are very good predators because of all the senses that they have. They have all the senses that we have, so let's go ahead and talk about those senses that we as humans have. We are able to see things, that's our sense of sight. We are able to touch things, our sense of touch. We can hear using our hearing. We can taste things. And am I forgetting one, Tiffany? I feel like I always forget. Oh, sense of smell. Perfect. Thank you. So we can smell things, we can taste, we can see, we can hear, and we can touch things. Those are our 5 senses. Now, sharks also have those 5 senses. They may work a little bit better than us, may work a little bit not as good as ours, but they also have 2 more senses that I like to think of as almost kind of superhero senses that really make them really in tune animals and also make them very good predators. Now, this first sense that they have is something that actually sounds a little crazy for me to be saying, but sharks are actually able to detect electricity or electrical impulses in the water. That's pretty crazy, almost like a spidey sense that they have, but I like to call it a sharky sense. So sharks are able to detect electricity using a set of pores. Oh, let me take a step back. Those pores that you see right there, all those tiny, tiny, tiny little dots. Those tiny little dots are called the ampullae of Lorenzini, and that's just a very fancy word for the organ that allows these sharks to detect electricity. Now, you may be curious, where does electricity come from in the ocean? That sounds kind of strange. Well, electricity can come from any animal's muscle contractions or also any animal's heartbeats. So when there are animals hiding under the sand, if it is not in view of the shark or of the ray, because rays spend a lot of time on the bottom of the ocean floor, and they also share these senses, sharks and rays can use the ampullae of Lorenzini to detect electricity from animals that are hiding either right under the sand that they can't see or anything that is right in front of them. Now that's really cool because that means if they cannot physically see an animal, they can still sense that it is there. And depending on the shark and the ray, where their eye placement may be on their body, means they may not be able to see directly underneath them. So having the ampullae of Lorenzini is that extra sense to allow them to detect electricity. Now unfortunately, it doesn't work super long range, usually within maybe a couple of inches, maybe a little longer depending on the shark. So they can't detect electricity for miles, although it would be very cool. It usually has to be used in shorter range. Now, another really cool sense that sharks have is the ability to detect splashing and movement in the water. So if you are splashing around swimming, if an animal is splashing around thrashing on the surface, sharks and rays are able to pick up on that using a sense called the lateral line. Now, if we can just get any picture, any kind of side profile of one of our sharks, ooh, look at this gorgeous great white. We're able to see the lateral line. So I can kind of see it depending on the shadows. I believe it's right here. It's just a line that runs down the side of their body, and it is filled with fluid. And whenever there are any pressure changes in the water, like something splashing around, sharks and rays can use their lateral line to pick up on it. Now that's very important because the type of food that sharks and rays, or sharks in particular, like to eat, they have to be able to use those senses in order to find their food. Now earlier I said something that might have been a little bit rude. I said sharks are kind of lazy, but also very efficient hunters. But I mean, I'm a little lazy sometimes too, so I guess I have that in common with sharks. So I mentioned that they are pretty efficient hunters, and efficient means they are good at conserving energy, and they know when to expel or when to use that energy. Now, the reason why sharks are pretty efficient hunters is because a lot of animals in the ocean don't really know where their next food source is coming from. They don't really meal prep or plan out their meals. A lot of animals are opportunistic, so that means they kind of have to eat whenever food comes along. That means that sharks do not want to use all of their energy all the time because they don't know when they'll be getting more food or more energy put into their body. So that means they always try their best to conserve their energy whenever possible. So what that means is that sharks and rays like to eat food that is easier to catch. I like to think of this kind of like, would you prefer to go to a farmer's market in a grocery store, gather all your ingredients, prepare them all up, and then make your food? Or would you rather kind of go through a drive-through and just get your food, get it, take it home, and eat it? That's kind of the dilemma that sharks get to deal with every time they're choosing to eat. Because they don't know where their food is coming from, sometimes they may be tired or they want to conserve their energy. They don't want to go after the fastest, the healthiest animals because that takes so much energy. Instead, sharks would prefer to go through the drive-through and get food that is maybe slower, maybe something that is sick, or maybe something that has a disease and it's easier to catch. So sharks like to eat animals that are sick, maybe ones that are diseased, or maybe ones that are injured, and that in turn is helping keep our oceans very healthy. It also really helps those subsequent fish and other animal populations because when those fish or other animals go to reproduce, they are passing down very strong genetics and they are making sure that healthy and other abundant populations or members of their populations continue to thrive. So sharks are very important because they are almost like the cleanup crew of our ocean. Now, we also got a question, will sharks hunt us if they smell our blood? That's a good question. That's also something that's been talked about for a very long time, especially in popular culture and media. Will they hunt us if they smell our blood? So sharks are able to smell. Sharks are able to smell blood, yes. But sharks don't necessarily go crazy when they smell blood. And I'm not sure if they can really tell if it's human blood or if it's other animals' blood. So yes, they are able to smell, but they don't really go crazy like a vampire whenever they first smell blood. It's one of their senses that they use in addition to all of their other senses. So yes, they may be able to smell blood, but like I said, they don't really go crazy. They use it with all their other senses. So if you are a human in the ocean and if you have a cut, I'd say the thing you want to be most worried about is maybe just getting any bacteria in your cut. You want to make sure that you're keeping it nice and healthy. You want to make sure that you're not getting any infections. So I would say that's probably our biggest concern, not necessarily any bloodthirsty sharks, because that's a phrase that is actually super inaccurate, and that's something that we don't really want to be using. However, that's often used to categorize sharks, but I'm here to kind of dispel that rumor and talk about how sharks use their sense of smell in conjunction with all those other senses that they have. So like I was saying, sharks are amazing hunters because of all those senses that they have, and they are typically apex predators, which means they usually sit at the top of their food chains. Now, unfortunately, a lot of shark species are either endangered, vulnerable, or they have something that's affecting them, which means we don't have shark populations where we would like them to be. We want a lot more sharks in the ocean. One of the main things that is affecting sharks is overfishing. So that is either fishing for sharks or fishing a lot of the food, the animals that these sharks like to eat, whether it be smaller fish, maybe other types of animals. But everything in the ocean is very interconnected, and overfishing plays a very big threat. A lot of sharks are very slow to mature sexually, which means that they don't really have babies until they've lived a good amount of their life. Sometimes what happens when we are fishing these animals is we remove them from the ecosystem before they have a chance to have babies or to reproduce. So that means that we are taking down numbers instead of allowing these sharks to reproduce and then possibly removing them for whatever purposes they're used for. So overfishing is one of the main threats that is affecting sharks right now. And I'm also going to draw a little diagram for us so we can kind of see how everything's interconnected. So Tiff, whenever you have a chance, if you would please put the what am I calling this? The head thing on. Okay, thank you. Perfect. All right, let's see. Let me go ahead and rotate it so we all get an accurate view as well. Let me go ahead and turn it this way. All right. So I'll make a little shark. Let's put our shark right here. We'll do a happy shark. So let's say our shark is right here, and let's say this is the top of the food chain, okay? So let's say this is the top, or maybe near the top of our food chain. So sharks may like to eat animals that are a little bit smaller. So let's say these sharkies like to eat fish. And let's say these fish like to eat smaller fish. Really tiny little fish right here. And let's say that these tiny fish like to eat little bits of plankton or maybe really small stuff. So this is kind of how the food chain works, or a food web. Now everything's interconnected, things can come in from this side or this way, but let's just think about this for now. So we know that sharks like to eat these medium fish, and these medium fish like to eat small fish, and then small fish eat plankton. So let's picture something for a second. What would happen if we got rid of sharks? That makes me sad just erasing the shark off of here. What would happen if we get rid of all the sharks? Now the next top of the food chain, if there are no sharks, would be all these fish right here. So what that means is if there's nothing eating these fish right here, we'd get a lot more. So we would have a lot more large fish because there's no other animals eating them. Now that doesn't seem like too much of a problem, right? We have a whole bunch of big fish. Okay, cool. But because we have a whole bunch of big fish and they're all eating the same thing, these small fish, we're going to have a lot less of these small fish. Remember, we got a lot more medium fish. Now they want to eat the smaller fish because there's more medium fish. So now there's less smaller fish because there's so many more eating them. And then that means who knows what would happen to our plankton. We'd probably have more, probably have less. Sometimes we get different kinds of plankton blooms, and plankton gets different here in Southern California or places around the world. So we need sharks up here, because even though they may only directly impact these medium fish, they actually keep all of our oceans healthy. So when we have healthy populations of sharks, it is very well balanced. They are eating these fish. We have a healthy, sustainable population of them. Then they have healthy, sustainable populations of little fish. And then the ocean gets to operate how it's been operating for the past thousands of years with those healthy shark populations. So this is why sharks are important, because of where they sit in the food chain and how they affect everything else. There's also a little fancier phenomenon known as a trophic cascade, and that just talks about different food or trophic levels and how there can be almost kind of an avalanche or snowball effect if you get rid of this top predator. So if you want to do some more research, or if you want to dive a little bit deeper, trophic cascade is a good phenomenon for you to look up and to wonder why we need sharks in these ecosystems. All right, so Tiff, if you want to go ahead and put me back in Shark Lagoon, I can talk a little bit more about my shark friends and also what we can better do to protect them. But before I talk about what we can do to better protect these animals, we have a very good question from Nathan who sent it in. How do sharks sleep? Well, kind of depends. Sometimes if it's warm, they like a loose blanket. If it's really cold, they need one of those thicker blankets. I'm just totally kidding. That is how I like to sleep. But we will be a little bit different than sharks. And also, a lot of this research is still being found out. However, what I do know about is something from one of our professors here locally in Long Beach and some of the research that he's done on great whites. We are really lucky here in Long Beach that we get to hear often from Dr. Chris Lowe, who is the head of the Cal State Long Beach Shark Lab. And what I know about shark sleeping is something that I have learned from him in one of his lectures. So here we are looking at a great white, and that's actually who I will be talking about. So he believes that great whites may turn off about half of their brain while the other half keeps them moving. So some sharks need to keep swimming in order to breathe. Some sharks do not have to keep swimming in order to breathe. A great white shark does have to keep swimming in order to breathe. It is what we call a ram ventilating shark. So because a great white shark has to keep moving, it can't just lay on the bottom of the ocean floor and take a nap. Instead, it may kind of shut off half of its brain to rest, and the other half of its brain may keep it moving so that it's easier to breathe. Now, because some animals like great whites are pretty elusive, sometimes they're hard to find, hard to study, we may not be 100% sure right now, and also, unfortunately, we can't just ask a shark and say, what did you dream about last night, or how did you sleep? But some of that research is still being done, so that's what we know so far, but but like I said, if you want to learn a little bit more, there is a bunch of information online, and especially through the Cal State Long Beach Shark Lab, and you'll be able to see a little bit more about how sharks sleep. But that's something that I always think is very funny to talk about. It's also very human of us to ask how these other animals rest. Now, as I mentioned, sharks do need our help, but luckily, what you're doing right now is actually taking a really good step to better understand these animals and better learn about them. Like I mentioned, as humans, sometimes we are naturally afraid of what we don't know. We have self-preservation in us, which means we want to preserve and save our lives. So naturally, when we don't know anything about sharks and when we see these really big animals, sometimes with big teeth, we are naturally going to be a little bit scared of them. But when we learn more about sharks, when we learn more about their importance, and also learn just about how cool and unique they are, we are better understanding these animals and also kind of dispelling any of those fears you may have. So I hope that helps a little bit. And also, some actionable items you can participate in to better help these animals are to eat sustainable seafood. That is seafood that is responsibly and locally sourced, cuts down on some of those emissions, cuts down on any negative impacts it may have, and that will directly help the sharks and all those other animals they like to eat. So whether it be learning a little bit more about sharks, talking to your friends and family about how cool sharks are, or whether it be eating sustainable seafood or maybe picking up trash locally when you see it before it hits the beach. Those are all good things you can do to learn a little bit more about these animals and to better protect them. So unfortunately, we are out of time. Like I mentioned, I could talk about these animals for a lot longer, but we do have other things we have to do here at the aquarium today. So like I was saying, if there is anything else you want to learn about, any more questions you have, you are more than welcome to email us at live@lbaop.org. I hope I was able to show you all why I love these animals and hopefully kind of humanize them a little bit more, because if anything, I just want my passion for these animals to shine through so other people can see how exciting and how fun they are. So I hope you all enjoyed learning about our lesson today about sharks. I hope you all have a wonderful and sharky rest of your day, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.